Welcome back to Old War Stories with Uncle Jay. This one is entitled The Carluccis. The Carluccis were a family who lived next door when I was a young kid. There was Peter Carlucci, Robert Carlucci, who I actually just looked up just to see. And apparently he's still on Long Island and lives a few towns away from where I grew up. And he's 57 now. He was older than me, and I think he had a younger brother that was Peter. They also had a sister, but I can't remember her name. So there were a number of things with these people over the years. They were nice. You could say hello to them. You'd wave, that kind of stuff. They weren't very warm people, so to speak, where they, oh yeah, really nice weather we're having, and just chat and shit like that. So they weren't really like that, but you'd say hello and that, and it was nice enough. It's not, nothing bad at all. Well, there's a number of different stories. First and foremost, they worked at the local grocery store, probably all three of them at a time, at one time or another. Which was kind of good because, like, one went in there, he got the job and whatever. Hey, my brother needs a job too. Oh, well, we got an opening over in, the fruits and vegetables produce department. So, he would work there. And the sister I know worked at the deli for a while. It was ironic that I mentioned that because she had an early 80s, I don't know what year, I'm going to say 82, maybe 83, Chevy Citation. The very car that I would have in an 81 model year later in life. It was carbonated, four-banger, typically. There was a six-cylinder available, but anyway, it was a junk mobile, as you might expect, or an Econo box, as we used to call them back in the day. And the carbonator on that car was fucked. She'd go out and start it, and it would take a lot of cranking, and then once it got started, if she let off the gas, it would stall. And it would keep stalling until it was warmed up. I swear to God, this engine must have screamed at 5,000 RPM for like 5 minutes straight, every single day. You hear the thing crank up, whatever, and eventually it would be warm enough that it wouldn't stall, and then she could drive it. Don't get it fixed, no, just keep doing that. Okay. Whatever. I don't know whatever ended up happening with that car or anything like that. I'm going to jump around a bit with different time frames and shit because it's just the way I thought of it. They had a fire once. They had a fire. I think it was something on the stove that caught. And they had these windows in the front. They were sort of like jalousie, as I call them, or jalousie windows, but not quite. They were smaller rectangular type things, and they would open like that in the front room, which I guess was their living room. I was in that house later in life, but not when they lived there. Well, actually I was, but that was when they were moving out, and I honestly don't remember much of it because I was just looking through what was there, which we'll get to a little bit later. So I don't know exactly what happened, but there was a fire. They called the fire department. Everybody got out, and the fire truck came. It was mostly contained in a particular area. I don't know, it might have been their oil burner, but that would have been in the basement. And the basement they always had as a separate apartment. Oh God, that was another thing entirely. I forgot all about that. And the people that used to live there. But anyway, if I remember, we'll get to that in a second. Whatever the fire was, the fire truck came, and my mother was home with myself and my sister, and we went outside. It was cold out, I remember, and they came. A fireman went in. He saw what was going on. He ran out to the truck and got a fire extinguisher and went in, and then ran back out for another fire extinguisher, and that was it. It was not an out of control thing or anything like that, and they were able to put it out with just a couple of fire extinguishers, and that was that. The extent of the damage I do not know at all. I was really too young. I was maybe 9 years old, somewhere in there, which would have put this 1988, something in there. Could have been even before that, maybe 86, 87, 87 more, but I don't remember precisely. But I had a toy fire truck when I was a kid, and I remember watching this, and the fire truck's there, and it's, you know, blocking the road, and all the lights are going and shit, and whatever, and they were all, you know, talking and whatever about all that, and I guess they were talking to the owners and whatever it was, or some shit like that. And I said to my mother, I said, I need to run in for a second. And I ran in and I got my toy fire truck, and I showed the fireman that, and he thought it was just fucking adorable. So that was really it with that. I just remember that they had those windows open on the front of the house for the night, maybe 2 nights. We got some wind, but it wasn't really a big deal. Whatever it was pretty minor, which was nice. Now, while it's on my mind, there were people that lived in the basement. There was a separate thing of like 3 steps and a walkway that would go, and then you would go down, and there was a door to the basement. Now, what's interesting about this is this house did not look like mine. My house was a cape style house, which mine is now, and this was a ranch, so there was no upstairs. It so turns out the people behind my house had the identical house, and they also had a fire, which was something totally unrelated, but that was also very minor, but that could be for another time. But they also had a basement door with steps, I remember. We went out that door because my sister was friends with the girl who lived there, and I would tag along as a little brother a lot of times. So that was kind of that. And you would go down in the basement, and there was a mother and her son who lived there. There was no husband present, divorced, I guess. I don't know. She drove a Toyota. Maybe it was a Corolla. I'm not certain. I just vaguely remember it was kind of an older Toyota. And one of the things I remember about that car is in the summer she would get home, and I would be outside playing in the front yard or whatever it was, and she'd come home and lock the car up and go in the house, and that was that. And I'd hear a sound. So I'd walk down there, and the radiator fan on that car would run at any time, even with the key off. There were certain cars that would do that, and that particular car did that. Her son, on the other hand, had a Camaro. He also had trouble starting that. Gee, it's funny that Toyota always started and the GM product didn't. Well, sort of a theme there. Just saying. But I remember he would have to crank the shit out of that Camaro, and then it would start up and it would go, roar. He had an exhaust on it, exhaust system on it, you know, so you'd hear him leave always also. So that was that one. Next thing, I was a kid. I was maybe 1st or 2nd grade, little 6, 7 years old, little shy kid, you know. And I had I want to call it a cap gun,
but it wasn't a gun. It was a rocket instead. What this is, or what this was a, let me see how I can explain it. Little thing about yay big, and it had little wings on the back of it, and rubber bands that would attach to the front nose cone of it, if you will, and you would stretch it out and put a cap in there. These were the kind that were just on the red paper, if you know what these are. I know a lot of the older folks will remember this. So it was just on the red paper, and you would put it in there, and then it had a metal tip at the end of it that would go through, and that would strike it when it would hit the ground like that, and the rubber band just kept the cap in there. And when it would hit the ground, the force of it hitting would strike the metal part, which also made it always nose down, and the cap would go bang, and that was that. So I'd put a cap in there and I'd throw it, and I'd put a cap in there and I'd throw it, and I'd put a cap in there and I'd throw it, and I'd put a cap in there and I'd throw it. The guy Robert that lived there had a VW Rabbit. Anybody remember those in the early 80s? Yep, he had a VW Rabbit. I remember how that started too. There was nothing distinct about it except that I remember the sound. It sounded unlike other cars cranking. But it ran, it got him where he needed to go. It was a nice little car. It was so, it had 80s written all over it. It was kind of awesome for that alone. But anyway, that was that. And I'm throwing this cap rocket gun thing. And Robert would have a tendency to leave his windows rolled down in his car to either air it out or, I don't know, or something. Well, I threw it, and this time it landed in Robert's car. Didn't go bang, because it didn't hit a hard surface, or at least I didn't hear it. And I'm like, oh my God, I want my little rocket back. How am I going to tell them? Like, oh my God, oh my God. And the girl came out, and I said, oh, I'm sorry, I was playing with my little rocket, and it went in the car because the windows were down. Oh, okay. And she just went to his car and just opened the door, and there it was. It went in because it was a two-door car, so it went like somehow behind the front seat, and it was just sitting on the floor in the back. And she grabbed it and handed it to me, shut the door, and that was that. No big deal, but I just remembered, and it was like, okay, not playing over there anymore. So that was just because of where he parked was sort of in the area between our house and their house before their driveway. There was space for a car there, and I was playing at the edge of our property, and I'm a kid, and I don't know what the fuck I'm doing, and that was that. And that also ties into another thing. They had a sprinkler system, in-ground sprinkler system. I don't remember too much about it, but the heads on this were prominent. In other words, they were not exactly in ground, but rather they stuck up from the ground about that tall. So you always knew where they were, and obviously you wouldn't run the mower into it. They were metal heads as well, but they, over the years or something, one of them would stick up. The other one was recessed in the ground, and dipped down around it. Maybe from the water and erosion, I don't know. And they were both on the same strip of grass, and when that zone was on, those two heads would fire, and they were totally different from one another and had different spray patterns. Well, little kids, my sister and I, we were out playing, and their driveway had very fine gravel. Very, very, very fine. It was not sand. It was very small pebbles, but they were like flat.
chips, but very small. Really, like literally this big. No bigger than a pencil eraser. And we would go and we'd gather them up as kids, and then we'd just sort of play with it and throw them back, and that was it. And they didn't care, whatever. But one day my sister said, "Hey, I have a great idea." And she, it's one of these great ideas as a kid that is not a great idea at all. Anyway, she got the idea, let's take all these little rocks and put them in that well where the sprinkler is. So I was the little brother, so I kind of went along with it. I knew it was a bad idea, and I expressed my concern, but she's like, no, come on. So it was one of those type things, and that's kind of how you do that as a kid, and then you end up getting hurt. But anyway, there was no harm in this one. We took all them little rocks, and we filled in that cavity. We went home, and I sort of told my parents, kind of. And we kind of explained what we did. We didn't have a reason why, because there was no reason why. And they made us do the right thing as kids. And go over there and ring the bell and tell them what we did and that we were bad. We were not pleased about having to do this, but reluctantly we went over there and we rang the bell. And I remember standing on the porch, we ring the bell, and we're waiting for them to answer the door. And my sister said, "I got an idea. As soon as they answer the door, we'll just say sorry and run." I said, "Got any more big ideas or great ideas?" So they opened the door and we said, "We're sorry, the sprinkler, we were playing and we did that." So they were not pleased, but obviously, like I said, no real harm done. And I remember Robert coming out a little bit later, and he was scooping all them little rocks out and shit. That was dumb. I don't know. It was my sister's idea, so you can't fault me for that one. And then years later, this had to be around 1993, 1994, maybe even a little before that. Could have been as soon as 92. Oh, before I get into that, they threw out once an Emerson stereo. It had a radio with manual tuning, a cassette player, and a record player, and two little bookshelf speakers. It was kind of like, I don't know what it would sell for back in the day. $89, I want a stereo for my room, and Robert was old enough that he could have one. Something like that. I don't know. Something along those lines. It was no great shakes, but it was what they had. The record player arm was something broken with it, and the tape deck, you had to lift the door up to press play, and then it would work, but it didn't sound very good. But they threw it out, and I dragged it home. And I had that as my stereo in my room for a while. My dad opened it up, and he somehow fixed the record player. I used to play records on it. Oh, no, as a matter of fact, we put that in the back room of the house called the Florida room for some time. I don't know if it's because I got another stereo. Might have been because of the Temple garage sale or garbage sale, which I had told in a previous old war story, link in the prescription. So I think that's what happened, and then we put that in there, and I remember playing that when we were out in the backyard, because we had windows that would open, they would crank out. And I had a record, John Mayall, Room to Move.
live version. That was the song on a record I had, and I would play that a lot. But anyways, so I had that for a while, and then my sister ended up with it for a while as well. And then I think it moved to the Florida room, one of those things. But we both had it for a time, and then it went to the Florida room. Eventually that was taken out of there, and it made its way to the upstairs of that house in what we call the last room. Room at the end of the house that you have to walk through what was my sister's bedroom to get to. We just called it the last room. I don't know. But that's where it ended up living, and as far as I remember, where it still lives today. I shit you not, my dad does not throw anything out. But anyway, 92, 93, 94, somewhere in there, they decided to move. I don't know if the mother's mother passed away or was ill and wanted to move closer to her, or I don't know. This was probably a Italian thing, because I know they're very close with family, and there's nothing wrong with that. They were, of course, because of the name, Italian. But anyway, they decided to move. Marie was the mother's name. Just remembered that. And I don't know about her husband. I don't know if she was divorced or something, or like, I don't remember ever seeing a guy there, like a husband. So I don't know. I'll have to ask my parents about that. Whatever. Anyway, she was there. The kids had kind of grown and moved out, and maybe she didn't need the house anymore. I don't know what the circumstances were. They had an estate sale, and we were invited in, and my mother went over there and got a couple of things, nothing really to speak of. There really wasn't much there. But I do remember a couple of things that happened. One was my sister and I went over there separately. We were old enough that we, I was 15, maybe something, 14, I'm guessing, somewhere in there, 14 or 15, and she was 16, 17. We went over there, and we told the people that were running the estate sale that we were the kids next door, and she said, "Oh, okay, Marie told me that you guys can take anything you want." So we got all the stuff for free. Now, I didn't get much, but I did get a couple of things. One was a Bohsei, Bohsei, calculator that had red LED numbers in it. I had a video of that a long time ago. I'll put a link down in the prescription to that one. Another thing I got was a box fan made by a company that you really don't see. You always see people with the Lasco fans, all the fan twerps and shit like that. Tons of Lascos and all these and blah, 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 blah. This was a Brentwood brand fan. Can't remember if it was 2 speeds or 3. The handle was kind of broken on it. I fixed it with duct tape and it worked-ish. And I had that in my room. High speed, it moved some decent air. If it had a medium, it was okay. And low was good for nighttime, except for the fact that for whatever reason that fan had kind of a whir or a whine. It would just kind of like spin down to low speed, and it would just go as it's spinning at low speed, regular, going as it's supposed to. It just had this whir to it, and it was kind of loud and annoying, but it didn't do it on the higher speeds. Now, I don't know the whereabouts of that fan. I think it's gone at this point in time,
But I do remember that I had that for a time, gave it to my sister, and she had that in her first apartment and her second apartment. And I know the grill was getting all cracked up and broken and shit, so I think she ended up throwing it out at that point. I know it was in the second apartment because I saw it in her closet one time. But I haven't seen that in years, and I've been to her house and I've been through pretty much everything in there, and I haven't seen it, so I think it's gone. But anyway, that was that. So I remember getting the calculator and that fan, and earlier that stereo from them. And that is really all I have on that one. Just is. Now, that went on to the next old war story that I'm going to tell. Got my little paper here. Of after they moved out and the new people moved in. So look forward to that. It's going to be called Oceanography Report Fiasco. So look forward to that one. Should be the very next old war story. That's going to wrap this one up. Thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Make sure you click like. Make sure you click subscribe. And take care. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.